Today I'm going to tell a Fryote and SqEarl story. In fact, I'm going to tell the first Fryote and SqEarl story. For those of you who have heard it before, I urge you to listen closely, because one day you may be in charge of telling the story again. And for those who have never heard it before, I hope you enjoy. So the story begins way back, before there were people, before there were dogs, coyotes, chipmunks. And it starts back in the time when there were trees and plants, so things had been along for a while. And way up in space, or some space similar to space but different than space, there was a creator. The being who created all this. And the creator was going about their daily business, creating little mosses, stretching out the fertile fronds of ferns, crafting leaves. And one day they decided it was time to make a companion for the oak trees. And so the creator created. The creator created with their mind and with their hands. And when they sent this new creature down onto the earth, they sent them down while the little fuzzy gray creature was sleeping. And they always did this so that that first creature would wake up having remembered something from a dream. And so this sleeping little critter came down, nestled into the crooked branches of an old grandmother oak tree, and was there snoring, cute little snore. And in that dream, the critter saw the grandmother oak. And the grandmother oak said, "Hello there, creature. Nice to meet you." And the little creature said,
Yeah, I guess it's, nice to meet you too. Yeah, guess so.
and the oak said, "You look like a spirited young fella. How would you like to be my assistant? In fact, you could be my squire." And the little creature said,
Yeah, squire, sure. Yeah, I guess so.
and the oak tree said, "Great. By the way, what's your name anyways?" And the little creature, never having had anybody ask them that question before, said, And the oak tree said, "Earl. Earl it is. Squire Earl. Now, listen close. What I need you to do is to take this." And right when she said that, from a branch dangling right in front of the little Squire Earl, a little acorn grew. Right then. It's dreams. These things can happen, you know. And the oak said, "I need you to take this acorn, and I want you to run as far as you can into the forest and bury it down a little bit beneath the leaves so that it'll grow. And you can help me on my conquest to spread wide and far across the land." And so Squire Earl took that little acorn and went, "Ooh, sure," and then ate it down in one big swallow. He went,
Ooh, that was good, yeah.
and the grandmother oak went, yes, interesting. Let's try this again. And so she grew a few more acorns and plopped them right down into Squire Earl's lap. And this time there were 3. And she said, "Okay, how about this? You can eat one of them and then go run as far as you can and plant the rest." And SqEarl said, "Oh, yeah." And since it was a dream, I remind you, he took the acorn and he went, "Ooh," and it grew. He went, "Meow," and it shrunk, and then he went, and swallowed all 3 acorns. Now at this point, Grandmother Oak was a little frustrated, but I tell you, she was also wise. And so what she did next, she said, "Okay, Squire Earl, I see that you enjoy these acorns. So how about this? I will grow as many acorns as you could possibly eat. And why don't you just take them all no strings attached. And so, bing, she made a bumper crop of acorns, and they all fell to the ground. And there were hundreds and hundreds and thousands of acorns. And SqEarl went, wah, pew, 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 running all over and filling his face. And until pretty soon, he was full. And he was sitting at the base of the acorn tree going,
Oh, my belly.
oh, 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 oh. And he looked around, and still, there were hundreds of acorns. And then he saw a crow fly over. And it swooped down, picked up an acorn, and flew away. And SqEarl said, he didn't want his acorns to get stolen by a crow after all, so he gathered up all those acorns and ran all across the land, hiding them and burying them and covering them in leaves and digging them down a little bit. And he said, ooh, 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 ooh. And the oak said, I see you've stashed away some acorns for later. And he said,
Yep.
and she said, I bet you remember where you put every last acorn, don't you? And SqEarl said,
Yeah. Maybe?
and the next thing SqEarl knew, he was waking up. And he woke up remembering that strange dream with the oak tree, who he was still sitting on, and the acorns, which seemed to be just ripening on the twigs of the branches. He thought,
Okay, here we go.
and then went off his daily business. Now, SqEarl lived for some time on his own, zipping about the forest, and there were crows, and there were some blue jays. He would zip-zap around, and in this time, the Creator was still up there in some space similar to space, but different than space creating. And so the Creator was up there, would also wake up, and would also have this sensation. When the Creator would wake up sometimes, perhaps after having a nice tall glass of orange juice, would, excuse me if this is gross, but it's really how the story goes, and would get a big cosmic loogie right in their throat. And they would go, and they would spit it. Remember, we're in some space similar to space, but not quite space, and it would be the Creator's divine snot bubble would be flying through space. Its snot tail flying like a comet in the background, maybe even catching on fire, and was zooming towards planet Earth. And on this day, when the Creator's cosmic boogie was wiggling and waggling and speeding down towards the planet, SqEarl was just waking up. Didn't know anything was going on. A little bit of sunlight was shining down on his face, and that sacred booger, that divine loogie, came down and splattered right next to the oak tree. And it just missed him. But, as we know, when things splatter against the ground, sometimes a little piece will ricochet off. And so, a little globular of the divine Creator's booger splashed up and hit SqEarl right on the face. And his cheek fur was glistening, and his ear was soaked, and a little bit of that goo went right in his ear hole. And it traveled down all the way in to his brain. And that is when SqEarl went. For that magical little mucus had spread throughout his whole brain and was now seeping through his body, and a great change was happening. Because now SqEarl would be interconnected with the divine matrix. He was one with the web of the universe. He had some small power that the Creator had to create blackberries, crows, chickadees, moss, but he didn't know it yet. And so he went on living his life, gathering acorns, biting trees, sucking their sap, nibbling on buds, finding fungus from time to time. And the years went by. And he realized that he wasn't forgetting where he was planting any of his acorns anymore. He'd bury thousands, and he'd remember every single one. And soon, his neighboring squirrels would come up to him and be like,
so I'm wondering, I can't remember where I've put any of my acorns. It's March, and I'm very hungry.
and Squirrel would be like,
Oh, I remember where we put all your acorns. Just how you put one there, you put one there, you put one there. I put all these over here. I'm not going to eat them, so I remember where I put them all.
and so, through remembering where all of his acorns were, where all of his neighbors' acorns were, he was able to feed all of the squirrel and squirrel population. But as time went on, Squirrel himself got a mate, made plenty of baby squirrels who would grow up, but something strange happened. All of his kids would also grow old, and one day they would pass away, either from old age, or maybe they'd get gobbled up by a coyote. But Squirrel, he never seemed to get any older. And so, two things became apparent. That one, Squirrel, since that incident with the creator's boogie, had perfect memory. His superpower, if you will. And a second thing is that Squirrel was no longer getting older. He always stayed the same age, even though those around him would get old. And so he didn't know necessarily if he was immortal. He wasn't sure what would happen if he jumped off a cliff like a flying squirrel, woo! But then boing, fell to the ground, and he wasn't going to risk it. And he didn't know what would happen if a bobcat snatched him and gobbled him down. But he did seem to know that as long as he stayed safe, he might live forever. Now the third power, because it's a story, and there always seem to be three things that happen in a situation like this, took Squirrel quite a long time to figure it out. And the first time he knew something was a little bit funky was he would go pew 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 in the fall, as he always did, and bury his acorns. And sometimes he would bury more than one acorn in a spot. And he always remembered how many acorns he buried. But as he got older, 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old, 10,000 years old, his mind, though he was still young at heart and young at body, started to get a little, and he would make some mistakes. For if he had truly buried only 2 acorns, but for some reason misremembered and thought he had buried 4, he would have gotten it wrong. But when he went to dig them up, his false memory would change the world around him. And so in fact, when he had only buried 2, his mismemory would transform those acorns into 4. And so anytime he misremembered something, the world would change into a line with his false memory. Because in fact, he was in a teeny weeny way a bit like the creator. And so at first, not too much happened. But then eventually, a few strange things started to happen. And the first strange thing that happened to a birch tree. Now there was a tree in the forest that Squirrel always liked to go tinkle. You know how it is when you're in the forest. You always have a favorite tree that you like to go behind to relieve yourself. Well, Squirrel, he would wake up in his oak tree in the morning, and he'd go jumping through the canopy all the way to the edge of the forest to his favorite birch tree with its smooth white bark, and he'd pee all along one side of it. And over time, the white bark of the birch began to yellow. And as he made his way around it each morning, relieving a little bit of tinkle, the whole birch started to turn yellow. And so other creatures in the forest started to notice it. Other squirrels, birds, and they would use it as sort of a street marker. They'd say, yeah, just go down to that birch that's all yellow and then take a left and then go there and that's where you'll find the shagbark hickory. Or, just beyond the yellow birch up north, you'll find a big stand of black cherries. And so everyone was chattering on about it. And of course, SqEarl knew that all the birch trees were white. And this one tree was just a little bit stained because of his yellow pee. One day, when he was running through this forest, perhaps he bonked his head on a low-hanging branch. But he seemed to recall yellow birch. He thought birches were yellow. He forgot all about the white birches. And so, the universe shifted to align with his new belief. And so, all the birches turned yellow on their bark. And not just a dull yellow, but a lustery golden yellow. And even their bark in that change started to peel back a little bit and get all curly and fringy like hair. And so, for the longest time, there were only yellow birches. But because SqEarl has a perfect memory, he years later seemed to recall white birches. And so a few white birches popped back in. And so then there was a split with yellow birches and white birches. And that's the first time that SqEarl's third power came to reveal itself. It was that if he had a false memory, the universe would change to align with it. And certainly, many things that we know and see in the forest today were a result of SqEarl's cuckoo mismemory. And so, with these three new strange things about him, he went along his forest business, collecting acorns, eating, chomping buds, making friends, running through the forest. But after a few thousand years of surviving, of outwitting all the coyotes, and outwitting all the bobcats and squirrels, and outwitting all the hawks, there was a creature who seemed that he might be able to outwit SqEarl. Now perhaps outwit is not fully the right term. He might outchase, outjump, overmuscle, overpower, and he was, in fact, a coyote. And he was a coyote of incredible size and incredible strength. And he did come by this size and strength by some predisposition of birth. But there was another way in which this coyote came to be quite large and strong. For he had a den. And his den was dug out underneath the protruding roots of trees. And he dug down in there. And down at the bottom of his den, way down there was a rock. And that rock he uncovered. And that rock was warm to the touch. It was even hot. And that rock was hot because that rock went way down, further under the ground. It was such a long rock. And it touched down into an underground river of lava. And so that lava heated the rock at the bottom, and that heat transferred all the way to the top. And so, in that underground cavern, there was a warm rock that kept that den toasty warm in the wintertime. But that's not all. That coyote would go out and he would hunt in the winter, as coyotes love to do, beavers. And he'd bring those beavers back. And if you've ever seen a beaver, they're chunky little buggers. They're fluffy, and not just because of their fur, but also because they have a nice layer of fat. And so that coyote would chew off a bit of fat and slap it right onto the hot rock. And the fat would melt and bubble and steam. And so he would then take a piece of beaver meat and deep fry it right in the fat and gobble it down. And boy, he liked that. This coyote soon, because he would fry squirrels, he would fry chipmunks, he would fry beavers, he would even fry beaver butt fat and beaver butt fat on a stick. And so he became known as Fryote. And Fryote would walk around through the forest, and he'd be the biggest and the stinkiest. And he bossed all the other coyotes around, and he got the richest hunting grounds and the richest hunting trails. And he'd catch rabbits, squirrels, you name it. But there was one squirrel he couldn't yet catch. And he noticed that this squirrel, who was a little bit crazy, I'm going to tell you, pew, 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 running around all over the place, seemed to be living forever. Now, coyotes tend to live a little bit longer than squirrels. And so when that squirrel was around, Fryote noticed. And so he thought to himself, there's a lot of squirrels out here I could catch. There's a lot of chipmunks, a lot of rabbits. In fact, I've caught a lot of them. But this squirrel here, he's really giving me the bugs. You know, I think I ought to catch him. And if he's got some sort of trick about how he's living so long, I'm going to find it out of him one way or another. And so, Squirrel, one day, was going about his business, and Squirrel, given his incredible memory and longevity, had a few culinary secrets of his own. Not only would he dig up acorns and eat them that had just been buried days, months, or weeks before, he would also bury acorns down, way underground, down where the soil turned to clay or rocks, and he would bury them in there, and they would age for years, and they would take on like a stinky cheese aroma. And sometimes they get so soft and gooey he could smush them up and he could take a fresh acorn with a smear of fermented aged acorn butter and put a sandwich on it and gobble them up. And so one day he was digging down into one of his acorn cellars of aged, very musky acorns. And Fryote was walking about. Oh, what is that smell? Until he heard the digging, and he also smelled that crazy little squirrel. And so, Squirrel popped up out of his hole, a little bit woozy from that incredible smell of aged acorn, and Fryote pounced on him and had him squished down beneath his paws into the ruffly leaves of the forest floor. He said, "Okay, Squirrel, what's the deal with you, huh? I seen you around for years and years. You look old, but for some reason you don't look old. What's up with that?" And Squirrel's like, yeah, nothing. And Fryote said, "Yeah, well, I've been waiting to eat you for a long time. And I ain't waiting no more." And he went to chomp SqEarl. But SqEarl went, "Ah!" He stuck up his hands. And one of his hands went right into Fryote's nostrils. And the other one peeled down his lower lip. And he said, "Wait!" And he said, I'll tell you everything. Just don't even right now, I'll tell you everything." And Fryote said, "All right, Squirrel, talk to me. What's the deal with you?" And Squirrel told him everything. Told him about the cosmic loogie coming down and splashing into his brain. Told him how he lived forever, had outlived everybody for thousands of years. About how things changed and how he remembered everything. And Fryote said, "Well, that's great news, because I'm going to eat you, and I suspect that those incredible magic powers and longevity are going to be conferred upon myself." And Squirrel said, Wait! Again stuck his little squirrel paw into his nostril. Fryote went, he said, if you eat me, it's gonna, your incredible stomach is gonna dissolve all of the magic and you won't get any. You'll just have a squirrel and you're never gonna live forever. And Fryote said, "Yeah, I do have quite an incredible stomach, so I guess that does make sense. But I don't see any other ways I'm gonna live forever, so I guess I'm gonna eat you." And one last time, Squirrel went,
Wait. Okay. I can find you some remnant cosmic booger. And if you eat that, guaranteed immortality. You'll live forever. You'll be the biggest. You'll be the strongest. You'll remember everything you want. You'll be incredible. You'll be the king of the coyotes.
And Fryote sat there and said, "Yeah, I'd be the king of the coyotes. Not that I already ain't, but good to know I could do it forever. Okay, I'll tell you what, freaky little squirrel. I'll give you 3 days to find me that cosmic whatever it is, booger you said. And if you don't find it, I'll eat you." And Squirrel said,
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Fryote. Have a great day. See ya, pew.
and went scurrying up a tree to safety in the canopy. So the next day, SqEarl went out, and he went digging. And he dug down, and then he dug down to his acorn cellars, and he dug down even deeper. But he couldn't find any acorn. And he dug all day long. And at the end of the day, he went back up into his tree. He was feeling a little nervous and a little scared. And Fryote came by on his hunting trail and said, "Hey, squirrel, did you find it?" And Squirrel said,
Nope, not yet. I was just waiting. I just took the day off.
and Fryote looked around at all the holes at the base of the grandmother oak and said, "Yeah, looks like it. I'll be seeing you tomorrow." So Squirrel went out the next day and started digging. And all around the oak tree, there were just holes and holes and holes and holes and mounds of dirt, and everything was upside down. It looked like a giant mole hole. And Fryote came by and said, "Okay, Squirrel, what's the deal? What's the deal? Where's this boogie?" And Squirrel said,
Yeah, just one more day. It's really deep down there, and I'm just about to find it.
and Fryote said, "Okay, if you don't find it, no skin off my back. I'll just fry you up and gulp you down." And Squirrel said, all night long in his tree, he didn't even sleep. He didn't sleep a wink. He thought,
Think. Where is the acorn? Where is the...
and so he went out first thing in the morning. Couldn't find anything. And he was digging down until the sun was blotted out, and the hole he was digging in went dark. And he looked up, and all he saw was the big, shining teeth of Fryote. And Fryote said, "Today's the day, Squirrel. You better come up here with a boogie, or you're going down the hatch." And Squirrel knew that this was it. He had a good long run of a few thousand years, and he thought,
Well, guess that's all. If only I could remember. Ding!
and in that moment, it all came back to him. The cosmic boogie, splatting on the ground, hitting his face, the exact angle. And he looked down in his memory, and in his mind's eye, he saw one acorn, ripe and fresh, getting coated in the gelatinous mucus of the Creator. And then how the leaves came down and the soil grew over it. And he thought,
It's right over there.
and he burst out of the hole right past Fryote and went,
I got it. Pew!
and he dug and he dug and he dug, and the soft sound of claws on soil was whoosh, 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 whoosh. Shh, 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 shh.
He said, It's down here. It's gotta be down. It's down here. Shh, shh, shh. It's gotta be down here.
And Fryote said, "Squirrel, your time is up. You best come out of there before I get a stick." And Squirrel said,
Yeah, just shh, shh, shh.
and the sound of claws on soft soil changed to claws tinking on the hard shell of an acorn. He thought,
Oh my goodness.
and he picked it up, and his little squirrel paws were trembling. And he looked at it, and he sniffed it, and he remembered that smell of the Creator's loogie, and he put it in his mouth and climbed out of the hole, and he showed it to Fryote.
Well, this is it. So I guess you might as well go ahead and eat it, and see you later.
And Fryote said, "Not so fast." And he put his foot down on Squirrel's tail so he couldn't go anywhere. He said, "How do I know this is genuine Creator boogers? Huh? It looks just like an acorn to me." And Squirrel took that acorn and turned it over in his hand. And just as he did, the sunlight caught it just at the right angle, and a phosphorescent glisten of multiple colors sheened whoosh over the surface. And both of them got tingles down their spines. And Fryote said, "Oh my. Oh, I never thought I'd eat an acorn, but this is worth it."
Boom!
And just as Fryote was about to chomp down on that sacred acorn, a furry little creature buzzed by and whipped it right out of SqEarl's hands. And they both looked over, and they just saw a fuzzy little tail and a fuzzy little body squirm down a hole and was gone. SqEarl looked up at Fryote and said,
See ya!
"Pew!" and zoomed off, pulling his tail out from under Fryote's paw and zipped up a tree and ran away. And as it turned out, it was a chipmunk who grabbed that acorn, not knowing that it was anything but a regular acorn, and ran down into her little cavity under the ground, and she chomped it up. And as she ate it, she felt this warm relaxation fill her muscles, and she felt calm and loved and at peace. And she said, "Yum." And for the rest of the year, that little chipmunk sat down in her den in a great meditative peace. Yum. And she was so calm and so loving that all of the plants around her den started to grow and flourish. And all of the creatures soon learned that her true name was Chipmunk. But the story of her is the story for another day.